Flashbacks. 5 good minutes in the clubhouse.
Tonight we're pleased to introduce Millie Bishop, a physiotherapist involved in the neurological side of things as well. Thought it was important as a follow-up on the concussion side of things, the CT, the developments on females more likely to get concussion, and hand over more to an expert than us mere bystanders. So welcome aboard, Millie.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on tonight.
Thanks for joining us, Millie. We wanted to talk, obviously, that it was a pretty topical subject with the untimely passing of Heather Anderson and her donation to the Australian Sports Brain Bank. And obviously, you're an expert in this area, and we thought it was important to pick your brain on what's going on in that field of work at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. Really important topic at the moment, like you said, especially with this news coming out about Heather Anderson being the first female athlete, or first female in general, but first female athlete to be diagnosed with CTE. And I suppose taking a step back before that, I suppose what we're looking at is concussion as a whole and how this is affecting females differently to males.
Yep.
Really important topic at the moment, especially with females being a lot more involved in this contact sport, which is really exciting. But it also warrants sort of further investigation into how this affects females differently and why it affects females differently. And I suppose what we can do in terms of preventative measures and then also management strategies and that rehab and looking at that return to play and how we manage that appropriately. So we're trying to lessen the risk of CTE, I suppose, and the impact that has on an individual's life.
And how are we trying to do that, Millie? What are the thoughts in that package, effectively?
Yeah. So I suppose what we're looking at is CTE being defined. It's a degenerative brain disease, and the issue that we have with it is at the moment the only way to diagnose it is an autopsy post-mortem. So after someone's died is the only way we can tell that they have it, and it's when we find these deposits of protein sort of within the brain. So what we're trying to do then, I suppose, is, like I said, limit those repeated head knocks, because that's what it's associated with. So there's repeated concussions and repeated exposure to head knocks. So I suppose we're taking it all the way back, and there's a lot of research looking at preventative measures, whether that's starting at a younger level, so looking through school sports and taking that tackling component out of it, or seeing how we can lessen that impact there.
And that's been done with both male and female?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Through both male and female. I mean, both genders are obviously at risk of it, but like we'll touch on maybe a little bit later, is why females are more at risk and more susceptible to it in the first place. But then, like I said, it comes down to those things of recognise a concussion as well. So on game day, having the right personnel there to recognise it. Obviously, we do at that higher level, but thinking down to things like local level sports as well, I suppose. Where we have the right personnel there, recognise it, getting players off of this and managing it appropriately in terms of the diagnosis, the right steps for resting and recovering, and then an active rehab and returning to sport at the right time as well.
And how do you think that's developing? Will it develop in, like the AFL's protocol at the moment is, the 12 to 14 days. Do you see that lengthening, that time?
Yeah, I do. And it's tricky because we look at all different sports and everyone has their own protocol. So everyone's got a different sort of time frame that they're working within, which I think we'll have to get to a point where, and I don't know how far away it is, but we'll have to get to a point where it's recognised sort of the same across the board. But that comes with, more research, and that's really what we need at the moment. It's a really tricky area that's under research at the moment, but obviously such a big issue.
Yeah.
And these things do take time, obviously. So, yeah, I do see it.
It's time with compiling all the data and that side of things that you can, it's a tick box area, but it sort of has to be, doesn't it, really?
That's exactly right. It does. And like I said, these things do take time to do the research well, and to look at it across, like we said, things like CTE. The difficulty of that is, we're researching these things over people's lifetimes, So it is a time-consuming thing, but obviously a really important thing.
Yeah.
So we've had obviously some male football players donate their brain to the Sports Brain Bank. How important was it that Heather, as part of her final wishes, that she donated her brain? How does that help you guys when it comes to research and take that next step?
Yeah, so important and really special that the family and Heather were willing to do that in terms of research. Like I said, it's something that's not diagnosed until an autopsy is performed. So really that's the only way that we're getting these diagnoses and finding out more about concussions and CTE and the damage, I suppose, that is done with repeated head knocks. So really important in terms of the research moving forwards, and yeah, very, very helpful.
Do you see that her donation will change the landscape for women's football going into the future, especially in the short term, but obviously in the long term?
Yeah, look, it has to. And like you said, we've seen this, a few of these in male athletes. And just the fact that this is the first one in female athletes, and like we're going to touch on too, why females are more susceptible, them being at a greater risk of concussions and then likely a greater risk of CTE, it has to have some impact on how we move forward with female sports female athletes, in contact sport.
And it's also an education process. Still so much out there. People keep going off, the average person, footy's being made softer, in terms of the sling tackle. And you're trying to go, hang on, folks, with what's happening off the ground in terms of not only litigation, which is obviously a massive issue as well, but the whole health aspect of concussion. It's not that we want footy to become softer with that crap comment. It has the game must change or it's going to die. And people just have still got their heads buried in the sand dramatically in that regard, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there was this sort of, I suppose it's a misconception that, you get concussed, you just get back up, carry on, it's just a head knock, or, that it's not a big deal. But when we're looking at a concussion, it's essentially a mild traumatic brain injury.
Yes.
And so what we're understanding with more research is how serious that can be, and obviously how that's affecting people long term. So while, AFL is fantastic, and while it's not just about that, it's not about, I suppose, the sport itself, it's bigger than that, and it's about these people's lives and how it affects them, moving forwards into retirement and the rest of their life. So it's a bit bigger than just sport, I suppose, and game day stuff.
And even just using as an example, Jordan Butts got concussed again from the collision a couple of weeks ago. And that, now, I think that's the fourth time he's had fourth or fifth time he's had concussion now. And like with McCartan for St Kilda now will look like his mate is going to have to retire. His brother has now gone through a fair bit as well. It's still so much learning going out on what's happening out there, as you said, of the overall picture, not just the game.
Yeah, and I think they are interesting ones, just in terms of how little it takes to be concussed sometimes too. So sometimes, and how often we're seeing it. I'll watch a footy game and you'll see someone get hit in the head, pretty well every game, and you wonder if that's a concussion or hope that they're being looked at. So, it's the nature of the sport, isn't it, in terms of being a contact sport. But then you look at those ones like Paddy McCartan in that Sydney game and how little of a movement it is and how much it can affect someone. So that's what we're learning too, that with repeated head knocks, so once you've suffered one concussion, the likelihood of suffering another increases. And if we keep repeating that before your brain has had time to heal too, the effects of the concussion on the brain just, can become detrimental.
And then you still get the cliche comment, people go, why don't they just wear a helmet? And you go, unfortunately, there's yet to be a helmet developed, which helps with concussion, because the concussion is the brain landing on the ground and the shaking still occurring. So it's not helping whatsoever yet. If there could be a helmet developed, then it would be fantastic. We all love that.
The NFL wear massively protected hard helmets, and they're still getting this problem.
Yeah, but that's why for different footy being the 360 game. My understanding is the gridiron, a lot of that's worn to stop the cuts and all that, where the footy footy is just different again. And
Yep.
we'd all love a helmet to be developed, but at the moment, it certainly doesn't look like we're anywhere near anything like that. Is my understanding.
Yeah, and I think that comes down to the education a little bit too, I think, doesn't it? Of probably the general public watching that and making those sort of comments. But yeah, I suppose what we're thinking about with helmets is they're good in the sense that they're protective of the skull, so protective from sort of skull fractures.
Yes.
Yeah, but what we know with a concussion is that's actually happening internally at a cellular level. So I heard a good analogy the other day of imagine a cup full of water and you pop a ping pong ball in it and then bubble wrap around the cup, shake the cup, and the ping pong ball is still moving inside the water.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening with our brain inside our skull. You're still getting that movement with the helmets that we've got at the moment. So like you said, unless something else fantastic is invented that can prevent concussions in that sense, helmets aren't quite doing the trick at the moment.
And Heather was a proponent of wearing a helmet.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's probably the thing that stands out the most is that she's taken some precautionary measures because of that, and it still hasn't helped her like she had hoped.
Now, Millie, can you go a bit further now on the bits of females being more susceptible and just explain that side of things?
Certainly. So while there is some research coming into purely female athletes in sport like this and why they are susceptible, there is still a lot that we need to work out. So at the moment, we know that females are about 1.7 times more likely to sustain a concussion than males, but we're not entirely sure why. So some current research does suggest that it's likely because of sort of bone structure, I suppose, females having a shorter and narrower neck. So sometimes that can be associated with less neck strength, and we know neck strength is sort of suggested to be a protective factor against concussions. And some research does suggest that, athletes with stronger neck musculature are able to sort of withstand the velocity of a concussion, so they diffuse that impact through their muscles, and as a result, there's less head displacement that occurs. So if we think of females having narrower, shorter necks, not as much musculature to sort of absorb that movement. They're getting more movement through their neck, and in turn more movement of their brain.
Yeah,
that's exactly right. Yeah, the second sort of proposed theory of why females might be more susceptible is looking at hormones, also looking at menstrual cycle. So there is some research that's looking at the phases of the menstrual cycle and how that's affecting females' risk of concussion, but also how it affects their recovery.
And also of ACLs as well.
Yes, that's exactly right. So there was a report by Gallagher in 2018, this one was done, and it does look at the effects of hormonal contraception on outcomes of sports-related concussions. So this is in America, and they're suggesting that females' symptom burden, so after they have a concussion, that's more related or closely associated with the use of hormone contraceptives. So those who were not taking contraceptives had more severe symptoms compared to those who were taking hormone contraceptives.
Wow.
So big area for, a lot more research to be done in, but definitely worth looking into. The third sort of proposed theory is whether there's underreporting by male athletes. So we know there's actually underreporting across the board. So both females and males underreport. But it appears that females do tend to be a little bit more forthcoming and honest when they're reporting their sports-related concussions. Why that is, not entirely sure. Whether it's, they are a little bit more concerned about their health and future, a bit more open about it, or maybe a bit more responsive to sort of that input. Whether it's males trying to be tough and carry on with the game.
It's interesting. Interesting you've said that, Millie. I interviewed Tom Harley at a lunch in Sydney. And Tom made the point where the guys now are speaking up more and coming out on the Monday and going, hey, I'm not right. Where previously, very much so. The old smelling salts, get on with it, play the game out. Where we've now progressing where guys are finally going, well, hey, I'm not okay. Not only about concussion, but talking about concussion in this instance, that I think we are getting there with that. That the male macho bullshit is gradually disappearing.
Yeah, I think you're right. And again, I think it comes down to, in the concussion sense, that education of, like we said, it's bigger than just a football game. This is their lives, and they're doing the right thing for themselves, but sort of by the team too, by speaking up and coming forward with that and being managed appropriately rather than just trying to push through these sort of things.
It's a fascinating topic.
It is.
Yeah, it is.
With obviously most of your male, actually all of your male donations that have come in, they've obviously come in from some elder players. Unfortunately, obviously in this case, Heather was only 28 years of age, which is just amazing that could happen to someone so young. But from a study point of view, having somebody who has donated their brain at the age of 28, does that give you even more insight into what needs to change?
Oh, absolutely. And like you said, it's a big difference, isn't it? I mean, it's such a loss of a life at 28 years old. It's so sad, but very important in terms of a research perspective. And also that link, I suppose, if we're thinking about most of these deaths are sort of by suicide. And so looking at that link between concussion and mental health, and CTE and mental health, obviously. And we know there is a relationship, but again, it's getting enough resources into researching exactly why that's related and why that happens. Really important.
Have you read the report from Heather's autopsy?
I haven't read it in detail. I did have a little flick through, but I haven't read it in detail.
Now, educate myself and the listeners as well. There were some abnormalities there for someone so young. Is that correct? Yes,
absolutely. So my understanding is that what they found was those deposits of protein within the brain. So they are what's, I suppose, defining of CTE. So definitive of that CTE being present. So certainly abnormalities in that sense. And like I said, that's how they're coming away with that diagnosis.
Absolutely unbelievable. What from your point of view, obviously there's got to be a lot more research done to this, but where is it sort of trending at the moment? Is there options that we may be able to diagnose this without obviously someone passing away in the future? Is that, I mean, obviously that's the best case scenario, but are we sort of trending in that direction?
Look, I hope so. And it is tricky to say just with the position we're at the moment, probably. But I think the way that it's getting recognised now in terms of concussions being such a prevalent issue and getting that recognition, I think it has to sort of trend in that direction. There's more awareness around it now. And as it moves forward, I think we'll learn more about it, which is probably a little bit unfortunate, obviously, but helpful in the sense that ideally we'll be able to get to a point where we can prevent this development.
Hey, Millie, greatly appreciated on coming on board. And it's certainly a fascinating topic, but it's such a vital topic. And I'm sure it's something we'll love to follow up with you in the future as we develop more and more knowledge and get more data and more information comes available.
Absolutely. No, thank you for having me on, guys. Like I said, very important issue, so more than happy to sort of have a chat about it and get it out there as much as we can.
Greatly appreciated, Millie.
Thank you, Millie.
Thanks, guys. Ta.
We thank Millie for her time tonight, obviously talking about the CTE side of things. And there's a few interesting parts of that conversation that made me sort of scratch my head and go, wow, I'm interested in how they're going about some of these testing processes. And like we said, unfortunately, with Heather Anderson passing away at such a young age, that they're actually able to get some great insight into such a young player getting this disease versus some of the male players.
Look, it was fascinating, but educational was probably my summary of that. Educational for all of us, and a great learning to listen and learn about concussion on both a male and female perspective.
Absolutely. We did invite Millie to come back on once, there's a little bit of more data with the CTE and the concussion and obviously players, obviously Sean Tasker.
Greatly appreciated with Sean putting me on to Millie, so yeah.
Absolutely, and obviously his work with Neuroflex seems to be going global at the moment. I did like his Facebook page with Neuroflex. There seems to be an article every couple of days that they're in a new city, some cases a new country, and working on some of that stuff. So we wish him all the best with that. And
Task is taking over the world at Tacoma.
It is. And we'll speak with Millie at some stage again with that.
Liking this podcast? Please like, rate, and subscribe.